as people are logging in with us. I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kirsten Bayer with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I want to welcome you this morning to this Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project monthly webinar for the month of June. We are joined today by my colleague, Brittany Boston. She will be on with me helping moderate. So if you need any technical assistance or have any questions during the session, you can feel free to reach out via the chat to myself or Brittany. We're also joined by our presenter today, Carrie Magro. I'm not sure. I should have asked you, Carrie, how to pronounce your last name. I apologize.
It's okay. It's Gary Magro. It's all good.
Carrie Magro, and he will go ahead and introduce himself here in a second. We were too busy chatting about the weather, I guess, this morning for me to ask him how to pronounce his last name correctly, so I apologize. But moving forward here, just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started with Carrie's presentation. Again, my name is Kirsten Bayer. Feel free to reach out to me. I am here for technical support and just to help with any tech issues and help Carrie moderate the session along with my colleague, Brittany. A little bit about the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project. ATA is the acronym for that, and we develop and present resources that assist individuals with autism, specifically focusing on the transition piece. And that transition piece can be from secondary to post-secondary education, or even, secondary education to employment or post-secondary education to employment. So we primarily focus on that transitional piece and providing training and support to those important stakeholders that provide that equitable experience for individuals on the spectrum. This grant is provided, and this professional development is provided to you by ICSPS, which is the organization that Brittany and myself work for. We create and support and deliver PD for educational professionals across Illinois. We provide technical assistance, we develop publications, and we facilitate improvement strategies, specifically focusing on college transition, recruitment, and retention and completion. And so that is our center's really role in this ATA grant. We were founded in 1977 and we're housed at Illinois State University in Bloomington Normal in the Educational Administration and Foundations Department in the College of Education. So as you can imagine, our email signatures are quite long with all of that in them. Here is our website for the ATA grant, autismcollegeandcareer.com. We can put that in the chat momentarily for you. This website is where the recording for today and the presentation slides will be housed at. So if you want to access the recording at a later date or the presentation slides, you can feel free to access them here on this website under monthly webinars. We also have a ton of resources on this website as well. So feel free to check those out for any of you stakeholders who are joining us today on the website. So we're going to get started with our beginning polls. We do these for just kind of to gauge our audience every month and just gather some information. So I'm going to launch both of them at the same time here. And so the first one is just which region are you located in across the state? And then the second question is actually multiple choice. So which ATA stakeholder do you best represent? So you can feel free to select more than one if you consider yourself a community member, but you're also from the secondary system as well. So while you're answering those polls, I did just want to cover that today's session is being recorded. Again, we'll have that recording and resources up within about 48 hours on our website. We do have live closed captioning on today for accessibility reasons or note-taking purposes. You have access to save the transcript if you need to do so for any capacity. We ask that you put any questions or comments in the chat or the Q&A today. We will have time for Q&A with our presenter towards the end of the session, and we'll allow for that time. And then tomorrow we will have a follow-up survey that will be emailed to you. And if you have 5 minutes out of your workday to take that follow-up survey, we would greatly appreciate that feedback as we're developing more professional development to put out to the system. So I appreciate all of you who participated in that poll or in those beginning polls. Just going to debrief really quickly. It looks like most of you are joining us from up north, but some of you are also sprinkled all across the state. So welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know if you're in Illinois, which all of you are, it's probably really, really hot where you're at. It's about 95 where I'm at right now. And then our second question, which out-of-state culture do you best represent? Looks like we have a lot of students and young adults on here, as well as family members and employers. So we are really excited to share this information with you today. It's going to be very, sorry, I'm just switching slide decks here. It's going to be very important information, and we're really excited to hear from Carrie. So Carrie, whenever you want to go ahead and share your screen and get started, feel free to, and I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Well, thank you all so very much for having me for what I hope will be an enlightening presentation. My name is Dr. Carrie Magro. I am based in Hoboken, New Jersey. And this is a topic very near and dear to my heart. I was diagnosed with autism when I was 4 years old. I was not speaking until I was 2.5, didn't start speaking complete sentences till I was 7. And thanks to the support in my village, I was able to overcome many of my obstacles to become a professionally certified public speaker. One of the topics I love discussing is the ROI benefits of hiring autistic people in the workplace, because autistic people comprise one of the largest untapped talent pools that we currently have out there in the United States. And what I like to tell people is that it's not about what a company can do for an autistic person. It's what an autistic person, especially a talented autistic person, can do for that company. Changing the narrative in our community is an integral part of our conversations around helping the fact that the majority of autistic adults in the United States are underemployed or unemployed today in the United States. So today I'm going to give you some really helpful, hopefully, resources on how you can go about, regardless if you are a company, a student, to learn a little bit more about how we could become a more inclusive society. So hopefully we could change the narrative within our communities. So to start us off in today's presentation, I just wanted to share a quick video with all of you so you can get a little glimpse into my journey from that kid who was scared of the world around him to today, what I'm doing today as a career. I hope you enjoy.
Next guest is an accomplished public speaker and activist who has devoted his life to helping others. Not bad for a guy who was completely nonverbal for the first few years of his life. But once Carrie Magro found his voice, he had a lot to say.
My parents have always told me I was special, so why am I special? And then later on, I realized that I'm even more special because I have autism.
Carrie Magro's childhood was marked with rough patches. He was completely nonverbal at age 2 and diagnosed with autism at age 4.
I just remember having difficulties trying to explain myself to the world around me.
When Carrie did speak, he struggled to express himself.
Most of my memories were simply just about that kid who wanted to communicate with the world around him, but didn't have the verbal means of actually doing that.
His mother, Suzanne, remembers watching her son have a hard time adjusting to the outside world.
He turned 2 and he was scared of everything. He was scared of the water, he was scared of the rain.
But as the years went on, Carrie slowly began to find his words.
When you can't communicate with the people you love the most in this world about even some of your basic needs, it gets really, really tough. So, but luckily, once I started talking, I never stopped talking.
Autism is often diagnosed at a young age. The average listed by the CDC is 4.5 years old. Because of that, people in the autism community feel it's viewed as a children's condition. It's something that has contributed to challenges and bias in the workplace.
The majority of autistic adults are either unemployed or underemployed in the United States today. So we definitely need to do a better job because there are so many talented autistic adults out there. If given the opportunity, they'll really succeed in the workforce. We need to change the narrative from what a company can do for an autistic person and instead say what an autistic person can do for that company.
Carrie Magro has autism and has built a career in public speaking, advocating for autism acceptance. He gave us these photos of his work. Magro says one of the biggest challenges can be saying the right things in an interview. He's encouraging more companies to forego that process and instead give people with autism a one-day work trial.
In college, he started a nonprofit called KFM Making a Difference, which awards autistic students with college scholarships. He later earned his doctorate in education. He's now a professional speaker on autism and inclusion.
We've gotten inquiries from people from Africa, Canada, the UK, and it's just shown me that we're not alone in this community. There are people impacted by autism across the globe.
He's written 4 books. His latest one is called Autistics on Autism and came out just last month. All proceeds will go to a scholarship foundation. He says most publicly funded services end for autistic children when they age out of school, so that could be late teens. He's fighting to get resources for autistic adults through legislation.
Wow. This is a tough one today.
So I hope this gives a little sense of my journey. And my journey truly started off with trying to find the right resources and really going about the early intervention process. Early intervention is the key for autistic children, especially within the first 5 years, as 90% of brain development is within those first 5 years, from birth to 5. So I received over 15 hours a week, like the NBC Today Show video mentioned, of occupational speech, physical, music, and theater therapy to get me to where I am today, speaking in front of all of you. And during that journey, I really latched on to extreme key interest, which became the reason why I was able to turn those extreme key interests into a career. One great autism advocate in the community, her name is Dr. Temple Grandin, says interests and talents can turn into careers. My 2 extreme key interests growing up were becoming the 6th member of the Backstreet Boys and also the next Larry Bird. So I took my love of theater and music to find a career in public speaking. I took my love of sports to get a sport management degree at Seton Hall University before deciding to change career paths, realizing that those with disabilities make up the largest minority in the United States, and often they're one of the most underserved, which led for me to get a master's in strategic communications so I could become one of the first professionally certified public speakers on the autism spectrum in the country. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to have that career for the past 11 years now, getting the opportunity to work with so many incredible groups like ATTA. As a thank you for having us out for today's presentation, we're going to be donating signed copies of each one of our books for their resource library in the hopes of continuing the conversation of autism and inclusion in our community. It's also given me the opportunity to write several books based on my journey, just in the hopes of spearheading self-advocacy and education towards autism. When I started first writing books, I assumed they would just be really good Christmas gifts for my parents. And when I wrote my first book, Defining Autism from the Heart, when I was 25, it became an Amazon bestseller for special need parenting. And it continued to give us a platform to discuss autism within our communities. Later on, gained the opportunity to work with our entertainment industry in a consultant role to bring a realistic portrayal of autism to our entertainment industry. Representation matters has been a really important concept in our film industry, but also in our companies. Again, opportunity to work with groups such as Warner Brothers on Joyful Noise, starring Queen Latifah and Dolly Parton, based on one of the characters in this film having an autism diagnosis. Later gained the opportunity to work on indie films such as Jane Wants a Boyfriend, HBO's Mrs. Fletcher, and then also the first season of the US version of Netflix Love on the Spectrum, which just came out this May. So one of the things we started off when we were just starting off our career was really just talking about the importance of helping individuals with autism succeed academically throughout K through 12. But we realized, like the CBS video mentioned, that autistic children were becoming autistic adults, and we need to be ready for them. And one of the biggest areas of concern that a lot of parents would reach out to me is what happens to their child after they turn the age of 18, especially when it comes to employment opportunities. So we decided to change the narrative when we were giving talks. We started talking to just a few small companies, and it led to larger and larger conversations with some major companies to really talk about their diversity, equity, inclusion best practices. Because a lot of the times when we look at disability, especially when we're talking about human resource departments, disability falls through the cracks completely compared to sexual orientation, gender, and so many other areas that we really should be looking at when we talk about diversity. It gave us the opportunity to work in consultant roles and also to do professional development training as part of Lunch and Learns and other things such as neurodiversity and workplace panels focused on giving individuals with disabilities an opportunity to talk about their journeys, trying to successfully find employment opportunities, get an opportunity to work with groups such as Google, Wyndham Worldwide, the Toronto Raptors, Citrix, PNC Bank, PSC&G, and American Express, among many different companies. We've spoken at over 100 companies within the past 11 years on this topic of autism and inclusion in the workplace. So one of the key messages I hope I can leave you with today is one message that a dear friend gave to me years ago. His name is Dr. Stephen Shore, and he's also an autism advocate, a self-advocate. And he has a great quote where he says, if you met one autistic person, you met just that one autistic person. We need to change the narrative, because when I was growing up, one of the first things that I found out about was a movie called Rain Man. And that's actually what my parents first learned when they heard about the word autism. It was from a movie called Rain Man, starring Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise, that came out in 1988, where there was now a stereotypical way of looking at autism, as many people in our society just assumed every person with autism was a white male who had a photogenic memory, and that when they turned 21, they could go to Las Vegas with you, and when you ate $8,000 on the blackjack tables. And we now know today in our society that autism is a very, very wide spectrum. When we look at autism, we need to realize that there are going to be some individuals, such as for example, we worked on the social media campaign for the first season of The Good Doctor, which is this individual on the left side of your screen right here. His name is Dr. Sean Murphy. He's a character who's a surgeon who is on the autism spectrum, who also has savant syndrome. We need to change the narrative and realize that autism is more of a wide range of individuals, like all the individuals you see on the right side of your screen. And the other reason why we need to talk about autism in our communities is the fact that the majority of autistic adults are unemployed or underemployed in the United States. And many, many different major news stations are really highlighting the importance of autism in employment. And I want to give you a great example of a case study of just a small parent-ran organization who are within our community, who are trying to do some great things for the autism community. Lester Holt from NBC Nightly News was able to feature a really, really incredible company as part of their telecast.
When Orion Togum first started work as a barista, she felt the way most people do.
Were you nervous at all on your first day of work?
Yes, because she had another challenge. Like more than 5 million adults across the country, she's on the autism spectrum, a condition her new boss understood well.
They're the hardest working group of people that I know. It's actually a win-win for us.
Glynis Harvey owns the Hidden Mana Cafe, just an hour south of Chicago. Roughly a quarter of her staff is differently abled. Her first hires her twin sons, who are both on the autism spectrum, and took a fresh approach to each task, like dishwashing.
I kind of think of it as kind of Tetris.
Like the game, the video game.
Yes.
Over 70% of autistic adults face unemployment, which is why in the last 5 years, nearly 36 bigger companies have tapped into programs to train neurodiverse employees.
I work for quality assurance.
At consulting company EY, the move has paid dividends.
We had these individuals join us and contribute to significantly enhancing and automating a lot of the training. Not only were we able to make the training more efficient, but also more impactful.
Meaning no matter what the day brings for these workers,
what would you say to companies who are afraid to hire people who are different?
I would say being different is what makes them amazing.
There's no risk in trying to give us a shot. That's all it takes.
Have a great day. Their future is brighter than ever. Morgan Radford, NBC News, Chicago.
So I absolutely love this example. And I wanted to highlight this because this is also part of your local community. And it's just a great example of individuals who are not seeing the label, but they're seeing the able. We have a saying in the community where we really try to highlight and emphasize that there are some incredible abilities in our community, even though we typically emphasize the dis in the disability. It's really about highlighting the ability as much as humanly possible. And the reason why we continue to highlight this topic is the prevalence of autism. When I was diagnosed in 1992, the numbers of autism were about 1 in every 1,000 being diagnosed in the US. And today, autism, it's the fastest growing developmental disability in our country. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, comes out with a biannual report every 2 years indicating new numbers for autism spectrum disorders in diagnoses of 8-year-old children who are on the autism spectrum. And today it's 1 in 44. It actually comprises 2% of the US population. Like the NBC video mentioned, that there's over 5 million adults and there's over 7 million autistic individuals in the United States. Boys are diagnosed 4 times more often than girls. Again, we still have that Rain Man stigma. And for many girls who are on the autism spectrum, they are more likely to be able to mask different characteristics when it comes to autism, leading to individuals who fall through the cracks within our community. So we need to have larger conversations about girl autism as well. In addition to that, over 70 million people worldwide have an autism diagnosis. But we don't only need to start talking more about employment opportunities for autistic adults, but we also need to look at post-secondary. We also need to look at housing, and we also need to look at guardianship and what that looks like, especially for those who have more significant support needs who are on the autism spectrum. Over 700,000 autistic children will become autistic adults within the next decade, and we truly need to be ready for them. But we also understand now that there are a lot of individuals who are being diagnosed in adulthood. If we just look at the past year, we know that individuals such as Elon Musk revealed on Saturday Night Live that he is on the autism spectrum. So some of the individuals in our communities are going about receiving their diagnosis in adulthood as well. So we need to have conversations about that too. One of the ways that I try to help, especially young adults within our community, is we've had the wonderful opportunity to have about 220,000 Facebook followers on our Facebook page, Carrie's Autism Journey. I get the wonderful opportunity to just travel the globe and get the opportunity to talk about this topic. But what I realize a lot of the times is that local self-advocates sometimes feel that they really don't get the opportunities to nurture their self-advocacy within their communities. So with that in mind, I decided to start a video series to share my platform with local self-advocates in the hopes of not only helping nurture their own self-advocacy, but also help break down stigmas and barriers for those with special needs within our communities. So one of the first individuals we got to highlight was this incredible young adult named Heather, who was just going about graduating from college and was going through navigating the transition to adulthood. And this is what Heather wanted the world to know about her story.
I was told all kinds of things. I was told that I was not trying hard enough. I was told that I was lazy. I was told that I was stupid. I was told that I was slow. And I know now that none of that was true. I just recently graduated college with all honors and magna cum laude.
Can you tell me a little bit about the shirt you're wearing? Because it's really cool.
Yeah, it says autistic. Ask a question, get an honest answer, a very honest answer, because I just speak what I feel, and that's that. I ride horses competitively. I have a horse right now. She's on full leash. Her name is Silverbell, and I do theater. I do acting, singing, and dancing, and I love to play sports too. I'm active in Special Olympics. A lot of my challenges were because I was not diagnosed and we did not know what was wrong, and I was bullied a lot, and I continue to be bullied sometimes.
How does that make you feel when bullies actually go about doing that? Because I used to be bullied too.
It's really difficult because for me, in my case, my bully had been an authority figure. So if a person is a leader, it leads other people beneath them to continue bullying. So it is very complicated. And it's really upsetting.
Understandable.
I just wish people understood, people don't understand that, they give, because, with autism, when you can't always say, you can't always describe your intentions or, emotions that well, people tend to label them for you when it's not accurate.
I love Heather's perspective here. And one of the reasons why I also want to highlight Heather's story is the fact that workplace bullying continues to be on the rise within our communities. And it's not only for individuals with disabilities. We often talk about one barrier to entry for autistic adults when it comes to employment opportunities is the fact that there isn't enough acceptance within some of our companies. We often have for example, April is considered Autism Awareness Month, and many advocates such as myself, we start to pivot the conversations towards Autism Acceptance Month because we realize we have so much awareness, especially in a digital age, around the topic of autism. But for individuals like Heather who were bullied by authority figures, it leads to a lot of challenges within the community, especially for those who have autism being characterized as a social and communication disorder, where sometimes their intentions are not visible and they sometimes might not be able to openly communicate their specific needs within the workplace. So it's really important we have larger conversations about having autism acceptance, but also disability acceptance overall. These are just some additional numbers that we need to continue to talk about. World Autism Month started in 1970 by the Autism Society of America. It's a great time where we can talk to our companies about hosting professional development events within their companies to really emphasize autism. In addition to that, April 2nd is considered World Autism Awareness Day via the United Nations. And one of the other things and why I also highlight Heather's story in addition to a few other case stories you're going to hear from today is that people don't age out of having autism when they age out of high school, when they turn the age of 18 or stay in their programs until 21, 22. One of the common things that I get when I speak at an event is someone will come up to me afterwards and they'll say, Carrie, you have autism, but you don't look like you have autism. And then they'll also say, Carrie, you have autism, but you look so normal. My saying in the community is that normal is just a dryer setting. And then the other one, which I'll get very rarely nowadays, but sometimes here is, Carrie, how were you able to cure yourself of your autism? I want people in our society to know that people with autism will have autism for their entire lives. Autism is considered a lifelong diagnosis. And my challenges to this day, especially in the workplace, consist of things such as making friendships, relationships. I also have a dual diagnosis of dysgraphia, which is something that a lot of companies should consider when they're thinking about hosting autism-related professional development, also giving the opportunity to highlight things such as dual diagnoses within our community as well. When we consider hiring practices, these are just some great tools for students, employers, and also parents to really utilize to learn a little bit more about how our companies are looking at disability inclusion practices. Many of the SAPs of the world, the Microsofts of the world, who have already started autism-related pilot programs within their companies, follow the Disability Equality Index, which is a free benchmarking tool that provides assessment on disability inclusion best practices and goes on a 0 to 100 scale on how they best are able to look at disability when it comes to their companies. Also considering having online literature on your websites that can discuss what the interview process may look like. Many companies that I talk to, it's really important to provide on-site literature that actually highlights case studies and success stories of individuals who have been part of those companies to give a potential employee the opportunity to see that there's a previous history of inclusion within their workplace. And also, in addition to that, one of the bigger areas of challenge for my autistic mentees is the overall interview process. Like in the Denver ABC video at the beginning, one of the things I talk to companies about is potentially doing a one-day job trial versus the interview process to show what these talented autistic adults are capable of versus an interview process, which might be very vague in nature, especially when we're looking at one-on-one projects that they might be able to do, especially when it comes to STEM in the science, technology, engineering, and mathematic fields. So some great onboarding best practices that I always encourage companies to look at are things such as the first 3 months of when somebody's at a company, such as things like weekly check-ins with supervisors, peer mentoring, which we'll talk a little bit later in today's presentation, giving positive reinforcement for small improvements, and providing feedback in private versus in public areas. This is really, really key, especially when we talk about building synergy for those employees when it comes to coworkers, being able to be on an equal playing field and not necessarily having their challenges being brought up in a public setting. Also making job tasks measurable when possible, such as, for example, you need to get a certain amount of outreach emails out in a specific amount of time. Being concise just helps anyone, but especially in the autism community, having concise language can really be helpful to helping individuals succeed. Some of the areas that I constantly talk about is that those who have autism are more likely to stay at a job longer. They are more likely to take less days off from work. And another key area is that a lot of companies I talk to say that, oh, well, I don't know if I could go about hiring people with autism because I think it's going to affect my bottom line, especially after COVID-19, where some companies are really struggling, trying to get their feet back from underneath them. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the majority of reasonable accommodations in the United States cost absolutely nothing. And when they do, it's often just a one-time onboarding fee of $500. So there's some great groups, and I'm not going to go through all of these today, but these are some great groups that you might want to consider when you are going about the hiring process of autistic adults. The U.S. Business Leadership Network continues to be a key group who really just look and emphasize autism along with a wide range of other disabilities. Just as a housekeeping note, before we go any further, because we're going to be sharing so many notes today, we'll probably share about over 50 resources for you to take advantage of from our autism community today. At the end of today's presentation during the Q&A period, I'm going to share a link where if you just leave your name and email, I'd be more than happy to provide you the PowerPoint slide notes from today's presentation, just in case you miss anything. I'm an avid note taker, and I'm always asking a presenter if they could go back to the last slide so I could take down a few notes. So don't worry, I'll be able to provide all of these resources for you after the presentation. The other one is the Spectrum Careers Job Portal. This was an initiative done by Rangam Consultants in addition to Autism Speaks, where they have over 80,000 jobs currently available on their job portal for those with autism. Some other key ones, I just love to highlight the Department of Labor, who have an initiative called National Disability Employment Awareness Month, which takes place in October. And they highlight things during that month, along with all year long, such as the Employer Assistance and Resource Network on Disability, and then also the What Can You Do campaign. I love the What Can You Do campaign because they emphasize an incredible group of individuals with disabilities who really have spearheaded conversations about disability employment, such as RJ Mitty, who is an actor with cerebral palsy, who many of you may know from the Breaking Bad series when he played Walter Hill's son, who discusses the importance of disability inclusion in the workplace. Another key area we need to talk about, especially as we continue to see the rise of autistic adults in the workplace, is the importance of understanding that some individuals who might be in our workplaces will be non-speaking. Currently today in the United States, there are about 40% of autistic children who are either non-speaking or non-verbal. So there might be people within your companies who might communicate, but they might not speak. And one example of this is a young man I met named Justice, who is now trying to find full-time employment while using an assistive technology device to help him communicate. And this is a little bit about Justice's story. Yep. You know what? It seems like his story is going to the next page. And that is why I'm so glad I'm getting the opportunity to highlight the PowerPoint slide notes with you after today's presentation, so you don't miss any of the videos as well. But just as a story is that he uses a Toby Lightwriter machine, which is simply a text-to-speech device, which allows him the ability to communicate with people at his companies. And now I'm glad to say that he has the job as a barista, which is what he wants to do. He absolutely loves coffee. And it's a really important message that he shares about the importance of understanding that just because somebody can't speak doesn't necessarily mean they're unintelligent. We need to change the narrative in our autism community that individuals who are non-speaking, because they're non-speaking, are unintelligent. Some of the most brilliant minds I actually know in the autism community are individuals who are non-speaking, but use other means to communicate. Individuals such as Carly Fleischman, who's a great example I would highly recommend checking out, who wrote a New York Times bestselling book with her father named Carly's Voice. So hiring people, again, with autism and other disabilities just makes good business sense at the end of the day. It follows 503 compliance, but when we also look at the continuing evolution of disability within our communities, because of the life expectancy age continuing to move up, we're seeing individuals who are developing their disabilities later into adulthood. So it's not only looking at cognitive disabilities, but a lot of individuals within our society will gain physical disabilities as they get a little bit older. And being able to be mindful of this in your companies can be really important. 1 in 5 Americans currently have a disability, but as we continue to see, autism is not only on the rise, but a wide range of physical and cognitive disabilities, such as ADD, ADHD, apraxia. There's so many disabilities which, simply put, aren't falling through the cracks anymore within our society. That's one of the biggest key areas where I think is why we see a continuing rise in many of these disabilities within our companies. So in addition to that, STEM may not be the solution for everyone. And it's why when we started having conversations where we started seeing groups such as Google getting national news segments about their pilot programs hiring people with autism, it kind of put autism in a box. And one of the great lines we have from our film we worked on called Joyful Noise is when Queen Latifah's character in the film says that when people are put into this small little box, such as people with autism, it's not about trying to cram them into the box even tighter. When they have capabilities that are outside the box, we simply need to build a bigger box. And that's where I kind of see when we talk about STEM, there are individuals who are starting conversations about adding A as part of that. So now adding science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, because there are many individuals in our community who have really been able to thrive outside of STEM-related jobs, such as Mickey Rowe, who was a Broadway performer who was able to be on Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime on Broadway. Grant Maynor is an individual who's made over $250,000 as a painter. Dr. Temple Grandin is a phenomenal autism advocate who had a film based on her life that came out via HBO in 2011. She's a college professor, but a world-renowned public speaker who's on the autism spectrum. And then also Amy Griffino, who talks in a wide range of presentations about sexuality on the autism spectrum as well. So one big question I get from companies is what reasonable accommodations might look like for autistic adults within the workplace. So there are, again, it is a spectrum. It's not going to be a one size fits all. The only accommodation I ever received was having my job assignments in writing. Sometimes I've asked for accommodations in for some of my mentees in things such as being able to have a note taker or a recorder for all of their meetings so they could play back the meetings at a later time. Sometimes having assistive technology devices such as the text-to-speech devices as well. One thing to note is that it's against the law to ask somebody if they have a disability, even though to receive reasonable accommodations, they have to disclose that they have a diagnosed disability. Although a company can never ask what the criteria of that disability is, whether it's autism, ADD, or another disability, just that they have a diagnosed disability. Human resources really just need to do a better job overall of acknowledging the benefits of reasonable accommodations as part of their onboarding best practices, because many kids that I work with are sometimes a little hesitant to disclose their diagnosis, and being able to hear from a company about the accommodations they provide can actually lead to conversations of disclosing somebody's disability easier in the workplace. If you want to learn more about this entire process, I definitely recommend, I have 2 TED Talks that are available for free to watch on YouTube that talk a little bit about these topics of autism and employment. The first one is more focused on young adults who are in college, who are going about navigating their post-secondary process while also finding internship opportunities to go about their first potential opportunities in companies. And the second one is what happens to autistic children when they become autistic adults, which kind of goes into a bigger conversation about employment opportunities. So areas I struggled with. So I went from a 9-to-5 job in sport management and digital marketing, where I was working with groups such as CBS Sports. And some of the areas that I struggled with, especially in the 9-to-5 area, were vague job descriptions. We've all probably seen a job description on a website like Monster.com, Glassdoor, where it said something on the lines of, and further responsibilities as necessary based on that company's job. And it's just that vagueness is sometimes a hindrance for autistic people when it comes to wanting to apply for certain jobs. In addition to that, challenges with group projects, small talk and soft skills continue to be an area of challenge. Eye contact is typically one of the number one challenges I see, especially when we're talking about the interview process, where a lot of just ignorance is out there, especially when it comes to somebody who might not necessarily be looking you in the eye. A lot of people sometimes just negate that as not listening in that time. Small talk, and then also one area that I've seen tremendously help many autistic adults when it comes to finding employment is video modeling and role-playing different scenarios, such as the interview process, and what those potential interviews may look like in terms of practicing different questions an employer may ask. So my background in employment led to entrepreneurship. I've seen this as an area that many autistic adults are considering, simply because of the fact of working your own hours and not necessarily a lot of individuals wanting to go about going back into a work environment when we have seen, especially during COVID-19, many people going virtual. I've seen a lot of success with individuals being able to work from home. Those on the autism spectrum are seeking these in our community more and more as we continue to see more small businesses being formed, such as the one mentioned in the NBC nightly news video at the beginning of today's presentation. So, and areas an autistic adult may have obstacles in include soft skills. They may have sensory challenges, which we'll talk a little bit later in today's presentation. Understanding language that's not concrete, collaboration, group projects, inflexibility, and then also anxiety with transitions. One of the individuals who I love to highlight during our presentations is an incredible young adult named David, who has a very unique story of living with a disability, which I think is something that, especially for the students who are tuning in today, you might be able to get some pointers on some things you may want to consider, especially when you're looking at employment in the future.
The greatest challenge was being afraid to admit that I was going wrong. I was afraid to use a white cane to travel. You know, and then once you face your fears and you learn skills and strategies and techniques, as well as positive philosophy, believing that it's respectable to have a disability, and surrounding yourself with other people who are possibility thinkers and say, hey, you know, I can do what you can too. I think that's one of the things that I didn't really come to grips with. And once I really believed that it was respectable to have a disability, once I learned to use assistive technology, once I learned to use a cane to travel, once I recognized and embraced those things, life got a whole lot better. Privileged, Carrie, to serve as the executive director of the Department of Labor and Industries Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And we're the lead agency responsible for employment and training for people with disabilities in Pennsylvania. 70,000 people, helped over 8,500 people with disabilities find real jobs with real pay. So we're here today to partner with PNC and other community advocates and partners to shine a positive light on the potential of individuals with disabilities and to help people recognize and understand and believe that people with disabilities are the most untapped talent pool for employers to consider. So that's why we're here, is to help spread the word. I learned from a customer who said, don't confuse a bad day with a bad life. And I think that's, everybody has bad days. Everybody gets upset. That's really, like, that's it. Like, you know, everybody, you know, you gotta, don't just go through it. You gotta grow through it. So I think that's really important. You know, don't confuse a bad day with a bad life. That's really, really important. There's going to be good days. There's going to be ups. There's going to be downs. You know, some days you're the statue, and some days you're the pigeon. And, you know, and so just knowing that there are people out there who want to see succeed.
I love David for being so open to all of us to be able to do this interview. I was keynoting a conference in Pennsylvania for PNC Bank, and I met David, and to hear his story and his journey was truly, truly remarkable. We were at a Work Matters Summit, and one of the messages I continue to give students, especially for those who might be watching, is the importance of understanding that not to confuse a bad day with a bad life. We as a society still have a little bit of a way to go, especially when we look at the numbers of autistic adults being unemployed. And one of the hardest times in my life, especially when I was just trying to find employment for the first time, was all the no's. All the people who saw me as quirky and saw me as somebody incapable of being able to work. And what I want you to know, especially if you're watching this, is don't confuse that one bad day, that one bad day where something didn't go right, where a company did not see your potential, and consider it a bad life. Keep pushing forward and realize that there are people in the community, such as myself, such as David, who want you to succeed. I think that's really, really important. So other areas that we need to encourage and advocate our companies to look at are areas of accommodations. And there are some key areas when we talk about autism that I wanted to break down some just recommendations that I truly hope that you will advocate for with your companies. One of them is really just focus on sensory issues. And when we talk about sensory issues, we need to talk about all 5 senses. So one of the first we can talk about is light hypersensitivity. So when we talk about sensory challenges, some autistic people will have a hypersensitivity. So let's have, for example, I give this analogy where if you have the volume on a TV at 3, for some individuals who have hypersensitivity who are on the autism spectrum, it may feel like it's more like 11 or 12 in terms of volume. This is one area. The other area, it's low sensitivity. So some individuals with autism might not necessarily have any sensitivity, where it might be more of a difficult challenge for them in terms of actually feeling certain sensations. So especially in dangerous situations. But one of the areas I see as a challenge for many autistic adults in the workplace is really on that hypersensitive end. So how can we go about looking at things to advocate for it? We should encourage our companies to consider dimmers or shades in our workplaces. It just makes sense for a lot of people within our community, regardless if they have autism or not. Also consider providing sunglasses or caps as part of reasonable accommodations, and also areas in your workplace that are less bright. In addition, smell. When it comes to hypersensitivity, is their workstation near an on-site kitchen? Being able to possibly avoid that for an autistic adult. Also, when we talk about this, the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us have gone to our custodial teams and have really been focused on cleaning products and making sure to clean everything. Being able to have fragrances that are just normal, not necessarily have any type of smell to them. In addition to that, considering central air filters, and workplaces near windows for areas that might have specific smells. Other areas such as noise hypersensitivity, there are companies that now have white noise machines, especially in areas where they might have a lot of construction in their areas, whether it's inside their offices or out. Providing noise canceling headphones and earbuds as well. And then also allowing IT to allow neurodiverse workers to have a music service on their company computer can be beneficial. Sometimes companies think that having their employees listen to music would be a distraction from their work. But being able, for example, for myself, even though loud noises bothered me as a child, there was always something soothing about music. Allowing your IT department to be able to provide these services can be beneficial. Taste hypersensitivity as well. When it comes to a lunchroom where there might be providing different foods for employers, being consistent when it comes to food schedules, and then also providing gluten-free options can be beneficial for our autism community. And also touch hypersensitivities. So at the beginning, I shared a meme in the first slide about I have a tough inability to tie a tie and to button my shirts because of some of my fine motor challenges. And also, for example, for many autistic adults that I know, sometimes wearing a tie leads to a lot of touch sensitivity for them. So when we talk to human resource departments, what does the dress code look like? And would it be possible to go from a business casual position to more of a casual look in certain areas? Other areas that we need to consider when we advocate for reasonable accommodations look at things such as the social environment. So again, weekly check-ins with supervisors and mentoring. It doesn't only help autistic adults, just helps everyone, especially during that initial onboarding process when it comes to actually retaining those employees. Getting the opportunity to know that they have mentors in their workplace makes them feel more part of the group and leads to better retention rates within those companies. Also, making sure employees understand the conduct policy and having open and honest conversations about what appropriate and inappropriate behaviors in the workplace look like. We've all been to those onboarding programs when they've looked at things such as sexual harassment, which can be a starting point to having those conversations about what appropriate and inappropriate looks like. Consider training videos acting out everyday scenarios that may happen. That's why I love ATTA is recording all of these, because I think we need to provide more on-demand videos for our companies to share with their employees to help them get a better sense of what is appropriate, and also to help them from the social perspective as well. Another key area when we talk about reasonable accommodations is environmental. Now, I think every company should have a quiet space or a sensory room within their companies. It just makes sense to be able to, for those who might have challenges with transitions, who might have sensory challenges, to be able to just take a few minutes to get away and be able to go to an area where, especially if they're working in a cubicle area, where they might not have their own office, to be able to unwind. Other reasonable accommodations we need to advocate for in our companies involve communication and assistive technology. I mean, Justice, it was a great example of that, but this is a case study from an individual who went viral on TikTok. Her name is Yuri, who's transmax and also autistic, and put this outside his cubicle to have individuals who are coworkers and also who are part of that company understand a little bit about just the autism community, in addition to his challenges at times. Being able to provide communication supports, I think, makes a lot of sense. I actually love that Yuri actually did this to just give a better sense to people within the workplace about how his autism affects him at times. Peer mentoring just makes sense. I think it should be something that starts as early as kindergarten, not only in our companies, but just having a 6-year-old read a book to a 5-year-old. Before COVID-19, I was giving a staff development to over 350 educators. And at the end of it, I asked all the teachers, how many of you in your classes have a strong peer mentoring program? And only 3 out of the over 350 raised their hands. And peer mentoring does not affect the bottom line in our schools or in our companies. And it has been shown to decrease depression, anxiety, and bullying. So it just makes sense, not only for our children, but also for our adults, because bullying does not end when kids age out of school. These are just some of the ways that peer mentoring can help and improve soft skills overall. And then we also need to associate autism with those strengths as well. Again, autism is a spectrum. There are going to be people who are going to need 24/7 care. One of my favorites on this list of individuals who have just been able to take that Temple Grandin quote of interests and talents turning into careers to true fruition is Dan Aykroyd. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Dan Aykroyd a few years ago came out about being on the autism spectrum, having a specific type of autism called Asperger's syndrome. And Dan Aykroyd, his 2 extreme key interests were growing up to become a crime detective and also to become a ghost hunter. And he took those 2 extreme key interests to co-write a film in the 1980s, which many of you probably know, with Bill Murray, called Ghostbusters. And later on in a sit-down interview, he actually contributed autism to the reason why he was able to come up with that script. So again, we need to talk about the strengths that might associate many of our autistic loved ones. In addition to that, authenticity is one area. I see a lot, almost to a fault sometimes, being a little too authentic and a little too honest in some situations. But I've also seen real strengths in independent thinking, strong memory skills, and also visual memory as well, both in short-term visual memory and long-term visual memory. So in summary, what employers really need to focus on when we continue to talk about this topic is clear job responsibilities. We also need to provide more inclusion and diversity training for professional development opportunities for employers, but also for deeper conversations with human resource departments, especially when we're looking at what their on-site and offline literature looks like when it comes to supporting individuals with disabilities. You will not believe how many companies I've gone into who, when I ask them what their disability and reasonable accommodation policies look like, simply just have the American with Disabilities Act as a PDF on their websites. And that is the bare minimum of what you should be doing to provide opportunities to learn more about what a company can provide. That's why we need to provide more case studies. We need to provide more success stories of employers who also have individuals with disabilities within their lives, the children, being able to provide insurance coverage, which will cover things such as applied behavioral analysis potentially, in addition to other therapies as well. Job coaching and on-site mentoring, again, I can't stress that enough. It just makes sense. In addition, if you're looking to learn a little bit more about the overall scope of disability inclusion in our workplaces, I would definitely recommend taking a minute to read the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy called the Business Strategies That Work, a framework for disability inclusion. This is just simply a 17-page PDF, which really breaks down some great tools that you might be able to utilize. And in addition to that, more resources on accommodations that you might want to consider in the workplace. So my experiences with disclosure, this is one of the more challenging areas I see autistic adults have to face, especially because it's against the law, again, to discriminate against somebody with a disability. But unfortunately today, especially in a technology-driven world, there are some companies, which again, this is against the law to actually do this, who have seen somebody disclose an autism diagnosis as part of their resume and have actually taken them out of consideration right away as part of their tools on how to separate potential employer resumes when they're going about the actual process. So it's not uncommon that we have these challenges. Again, that ignorance is out there within our community, which sometimes leads to autistic individuals not wanting to go about disclosing their diagnosis. But especially for those who do need those accommodations to succeed in the workplace. I mean, for myself, I received such limited reasonable accommodations, I could go about the process of really never acknowledging my diagnosis. But I think it's important when we talk to autistic adults to make sure that they really do their homework, they do their due diligence, going on websites such as glassdoor.com and trying to read as many examples of individuals who have had success within those companies. And honestly, as somebody who has an invisible disability, who doesn't have those challenges on the surface, that's why I hope as a society, we can have larger conversations towards autism acceptance, because there are many individuals in our community who have that invisible disability and are unfortunately discriminated because of that, because they don't necessarily see the ongoing challenges that some individuals have in our community. In addition to that, we should be advocating for our companies to try to host more diversity and inclusion events around initiatives such as World Autism Month, which happens every April, Mental Health Awareness Month, which happens in May, and being able to associate that autism is not a mental health condition, although there are many individuals with autism who face challenges in mental health related areas. Also, National Disability Employment Awareness Month every October, which is also a great segue to also have conversations about workplace bullying, as October is also National Bullying Prevention Month. And then also Employee Appreciation Day is a great day to just help your companies understand individuals with disabilities who have been able to find success within the workplace. So, and this is just my final message before we open it up to Q&A. At the end of the day, let's just continue to promote kindness within our companies, because regardless if somebody has a disability, there are so many individuals in our community who just want just what anyone else wants, to succeed and being able to give the opportunities to succeed. So not all disabilities look like this. The sign that you see on the handicap placard, some look like this. So at the end of the day, we should just continue to be promoting kindness within our companies, but also our societies as well. So finally, I never expected this to be my life. I was always the kid who was told what he wouldn't be able to do when he would go about trying to find meaningful employment. I was told by so many people that college would not be a possibility because of my autism diagnosis and the severity of the challenges associated with my autism diagnosis. And I just like to tell people today that autism can't define me, and I define autism. And I can only hope that each and every single one of you, regardless of any challenge and any time a naysayer has ever told you what you wouldn't be able to do in this world, that you can go out there, you can define your lives and your journeys in the way that you best see it every single day. And if you need any help getting started in those conversations, these are the ways that you can stay in contact with me after today's presentation. I thank you all so much for being an incredible audience. Again, these are the ways that you can stay in contact with me. That is the link where you can receive the PowerPoint slide notes from today's presentation. And I consider testimonials the greatest compliment. If you learned something new from today's presentation, in that PowerPoint slide note link, there will just be a little box where you can leave a testimonial. I would greatly appreciate it, so we can include it in our future marketing materials as we continue to ask companies to go about diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So with that in mind, I'd be more than happy to open it up to any questions that you have. Feel free to write them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can for the rest of today's allotted time. Thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Yeah, so while we give everybody a couple of seconds here to type in any questions, I'm going to go ahead and put the survey link for the follow-up survey that you'll receive in your email tomorrow in the chat. That way, if you just want to take it right away while the session is timely in your mind, we appreciate it. I know I like to do that.
I do as well. And just for everyone, I'm also including the PowerPoint slide note link in the chat. I know sometimes clicking the URL on the actual slide does not necessarily lead you to a follow-up box if you're in the full screen mode. So I just included it in the chat for all of you in case you need the PowerPoint slide notes. So yeah, any thoughts, questions? I would also just love if people in the chat box would just tell us where you're tuning in from as well, and just any additional things that you've noticed about this topic of autism and employment. I would just love to hear your perspectives if you would like to write in the chat as well. And Kirsten just shared the Survey Monkey link for her survey in the chat box as well, if you want to take a chance to utilize that too. Oh, this is a great question. Alexandra writes, hey, Alexandra, after high school, did you enroll in any adult transition programs prior to college education? If so, how is your experience? I'm a speech language pathologist and I'm interested in seeking out supporting individuals post high school in this area. Alexandra, that's a really, really great question. I did not enroll in any adult transition programs. And to be perfectly honest, one of the things that I hope you will advocate for as an SLP is transitional services as part of a student's individualized education plan when they turn the age of 14 and in some states 16. I believe in Chicago it is and in the general Illinois area, it is 14 where they are supposed to provide transitional services. I did not receive any transitional services. And ironically enough, when I was going about my post-secondary experience, I sat my disability support specialist down and I said to her, if you could hook me up with that IEP, I'll be right out the door, not knowing that I was going to be receiving 504 reasonable accommodations and that there was a difference between the two. So we need to do a better job of making sure that high schools are actually going about this process. Some great ways is just really building on the parent-teacher collaboration to make sure that they understand that this is supposed to be happening. So high schools don't let it fall through the cracks and brush it under the rug, if you will. I think that's really, really key. There's also some great adult transition programs out there. Most of them are 501c3, so it is really spread out further than it having something that's actually stationed in each state. So it's really about doing the due diligence there. Any other thoughts, questions? Feel free to write them in the chat or the Q&A box. All right, well, I will be here for the next few minutes if anyone has any further questions, but for those who are just finishing up and feel free to go to, oh, there we go. Kaylin writes, hey, Kaylin. Kaylin says, is there any suggestions you have for supporting students throughout their school experiences? I teach students with disabilities K through 5 right now. Yes, Caitlin, one of the most important things based on my experiences, especially when it comes to the overall developmental milestones that they're reaching, if they're reaching enough developmental milestones, for example, individuals who have level 1 autism, such as myself versus level 2 and level 3 autism, definitely having conversations about diagnoses in our schools can help them better understand their own diagnosis and also hopefully lead to more self-advocacy from them from an early age. I also definitely recommend during the parent-teacher collaboration process, having students actually sit in on their IEP meetings to learn more about their accommodations and what that looks like. It's truly, truly pivotal that we have those conversations with our kids so they can nurture their self-advocacy as they get older. That's why I love peer mentoring as early as possible, because getting a 6-year-old just simply to read a book to a 5-year-old and maybe sometimes share a little bit about their own diagnoses, especially if they are similar in nature to the mentee, can be really, really helpful. I continue to say that's one of the areas to really build on success. And then also looking at reward systems. I mean, we definitely need to look at how we can go about more token systems in our schools to help build on self-motivation, and then weaning it as they get older by providing them more role models and more opportunities to understand the success stories and what their futures may look like as well. So those are two really, really important areas. And sometimes they get pushback from parents when I say that because they don't want their child to use their disability as a crutch. And that's when I give them the Elon Musk of the world, the Dan Aykroyds of the world, giving them successful people for those individuals within our community to understand what could be possible for them. This is another great question. Alexandra in Geneso, Illinois, an organization recently formed. Oh, this is not a question, this is just a comment form called Inspire Continuing Care. I'm not affiliated with them, just aware of their recent existence. It can be found on Facebook if you'd like more info. Awesome. Alexandra, thanks so much for sharing that. Anytime, Caitlin. Any of your thoughts, questions before we wrap up?
I think we're good, Carrie. Thank you so much. I just want to thank you for your time presenting today and this very valuable information. Again, this session was recorded. So if you have any colleagues or people that you would like to send this to, you will be receiving that information tomorrow in your follow-up email with the link to the recording, and that recording will be up in about 48 hours. So you'll have everything accessible to you, and then you can also access the slide deck as well there. And everybody's just saying thank you to Carrie. So thank you for taking the time out of your Tuesday mornings. And we will see you all next month for our July added training as well.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You too.